morning.
Good morning.
So, I've really been diving into gratitude recently. And I know life happens fast, and if we don't express that gratitude, we can regret that. Of all the things we regret in life, not being able to step back and say thank you is something that it hits all of us. So I really want to start by saying thank you. I'm honored to be here. I think a lot of times people say, oh, I'm honored to be here, and it's words, but I'm telling you, I really genuinely am. My life has led me to this moment. Good friends with Ray Lewis, who was just inducted into the Hall of Fame. He invited me to come to that Hall of Fame ceremony, and that was this weekend, and I said, I love you, Ray, I can't, I've got something I'm doing. My wife said, oh, you should tell people about that. I'm like, it's a no-brainer with why I chose to come here. There was a gnat, and this gnat, he woke up from a nap. He was sleeping on this big bull on his horns. So this gnat woke up and he said, oh, I'm sorry, I fell asleep. And he said, I'm gonna leave now. And the bull said, I didn't even know you were there. And I thought, in my life, I vow I will never be that gnat. When I leave this earth, people will know I left this earth, and I know every single one of you is like that as well. You're not gonna leave this earth and people will be like, oh, I didn't even know that person was here. You're leaving a mark constantly with what you're doing, with the impact that you're doing. And your energy is transformative. What you're going to be doing and what you are doing right now speaks volumes. Look, there were two young archery students, and they were gonna have a big archery contest the next day. So they decided to be kind of ornery, they're teenagers. One of them, they sneaked out, he goes to the target, and he puts his arrow right in the center of the target. So the next morning, everybody wakes up, and they're gonna have this contest, and the target's like way far away. So all the students fire. So they go up to the target, and obviously the one arrow is right in the middle. So the teacher's like, man, this is awesome. And his friend's like hitting him like, he believes it. And the teacher looks at him and goes, that's wonderful. Now let me see you do it again. So they go back in line, and now this student's like, his buddy's like about to pee himself. He's like, there's no way this is happening. So this student, this time, he goes, he reaches back, he lets the arrow fly, bam, hits right in the middle of the target. His friend, he said, how the heck did you do that? I know you cheated, you know you cheated. He said, the arrow already knew the path. I just had to let it go down the path it already knew. When it comes to corrections, the reality is for many years, we were doing things not the most effective way, but we did the best we could with what we had at the time. But the truth is, as of right now, we know the path. The path is laid out in front of us. Meeting people where they are, treating people with compassion, training COs, training people who are in there working so that they can help make a change. We know that's the path. Now all we have to do is let the arrow fly. So I gave a TED talk about in the prison, and I talked about there's so many either-ors in this world. We live in the big fancy word is enantiodromia. It's a real 75-cent word. It means you go from one extreme to the other. And we see that a lot. It's either my side or this side. And there's a lot of them versus us. But my argument is, and we see that in corrections all the time, it's like officers versus inmates, but my whole deal is in life, there is no them, there's only us. We're all in this together. That's our humanity. That's the piece that's powerful. So after 20 years of doing therapy, seeing I have 20,000 plus hours of clinical experience. I've done stuff on television. I work with celebrities. I work with UFC fighters, some of the best athletes in the world, and I work in some of the toughest prisons. And everyday people struggling with issues. So I realized that the world boils down to two kinds of people. You're going to want to write this down. There are basically people who have issues and dead people. So if you're not currently dead, you have issues, so do I. We all do. And this is the approach that's so disarming that I take with everybody. I'm not coming up, I'm up here, you're down there. I'm in this, we're all in this together. The stuff I teach, the stuff I give people, is stuff that you can walk away with right now and start to implement. Because it's life, it's what we're doing every moment. Every moment matters. There was a young student, he wanted to be the best swordsman in all the land, so he goes to this master and he says, listen, I'm gonna work real hard, I wanna be the best swordsman in all the land, how long will it take me? Master says, 10 years. He said, no, I don't have that kind of time. Listen, I'll work my butt off. I'll do whatever you want. My dad's getting old. I got to get this done. Now how long will it take? And the master said, 20 years. He said, I don't think you heard me. I will put my heart and soul into this. I'll morning, noon, and night. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll work harder than anybody you've ever seen in your life. Now how long will it take? And the master said, 70 years. He's like, what? Oh, he got the lesson. The lesson was patience. You can't rush greatness. You can't rush experience. You have to have that experience. He realized this was the right teacher for him, so he decided to study under this teacher. The teacher didn't give him a sword. He didn't let him touch anything. Day in, day out, he just went around doing his routine chores. Months went by. Years went by. The student started to forget all about his dream. One day he was in the kitchen. He was doing dishes, and the master sneaked up behind him. Big wooden sword. Bam! Smacks him on the head. Later that evening, the student's going to bed, and when the master's under the bed, he cuts out, bam! Smacks him again. He does this to him day in, day out. He surprises him, scares him, until the student realizes that he has to be ready in every given moment, that there can never be a moment off. And when he realizes that, the master trains him. When he trains him, legends say he became the greatest samurai warrior in all of Japan. Every moment matters. That's why I started off by saying thank you to be here for this, because this moment matters to me. It matters to you. It matters for all of us, what we're doing. You're always emitting energy. Listen to this. You're always emitting energy. And that's powerful to know. Like literally just sitting there right now, you're giving off an energy. And our energy is powerful. And if we are not active in being aware of the energy we're giving off, we could be impacting people in ways we don't want to be impacting people. So when I do work with trainings with CEOs, and when I'm in there with CEOs, I have them become mindful of how they're coming across to others. And sometimes it's yielding with them. I'm going to explain what yield theory is and going in there with them. In fact, here's how I got started. Years ago, I was a tenured professor at the University of Nevada in Reno. And a student of mine, as soon as I finished my doctorate, I got a professor, I was a professor out there. So a student of mine, she worked with these guys who were convicted of violent crimes in these anger management groups. Anyone from California here knows if you're sentenced to, if you're convicted of a violent crime in California, after you're done with time in prison or jail, you're sentenced to 52 weeks of anger management. So she had me come sit in and watch these groups. And so I went in undercover just like this. Everybody assumed I was one of the guys. I sat in the back and I listened. And it blew my mind, because one thing, the teacher was so pejorative. He was like, you're scum, you'll never change, you'll never change. And I'm thinking, how is somebody supposed to change if you're telling them they're never going to change? And then I watched the guys in the group say they had to write what's called a letter of accountability. So the guy was like, listen, he said, just scratch this out, just put this here, just put this here, just don't say that, just say this. Boom, he read at the end of the class, check mark, that guy graduates, moves on out of there. He's not accountable. Oh, but bureaucratically he's accountable. We have that piece of paper that says something. So I said to myself, I will never make that kind of accountability. I want to drive people to want to be accountable for their actions. So I took over and I started to run the groups myself. First day running the group, I'm standing there and guys are in line, waiting in line to sign in, and the guy looks at me and he goes, I said, go ahead. He said, no, go ahead, you go ahead. I said, no, I'm Dr. Conte, go ahead. He said, oh yeah, I'm Dr. Conte too. I said, no, I really am. I need your sign and sit down. So what I saw and saw was this. After guys would get off parole or probation, after 52 weeks of having to pay out of pocket for this group, they would voluntarily come back to the group. I had parole officers come in and say, hey, listen, I'm struggling with my wife. Can I just come in and sit in the back of the group and act like I'm checking up on this guy? I'd be like, sure. Because this is about life. This is about life. There are two kinds of people. So we saw changes that we just never had seen before. So when I got to come back and meet John Wetzel, I was like, listen, I'm out of my skin excited about this. I was excited. And yes, he put me down in the SMU, those guys. It was a whole new world. It was a whole new world. But here's the thing. We saw changes happen And it's about conscious education. It's about compassion. There was a man, I remember working with a guy there, known as Monster. I mean, his jacket was so bad. Think about this. I'm 20,000 hours of clinical counseling experience. His jacket was so bad, and to be honest about this, when I left that day, after reading it in the car on the way home, I cried. Later on, I ended up working. I put everything into it. I'm like, listen, he's going to eventually get out. I'm giving him my best. He threw himself fully into the program. I threw myself into working with him. He told me stuff, you know, I'm a very non-judgmental person, so people tell me everything. Sometimes it's not always easy to hear and be that sin eater. But he did. He told me all this stuff, right? We watched him change. 2 years later, I was speaking in another institution. I hear, Doc. I turn around, my man, who we thought never was ever going to be leaving that place, was out. He was a mentor. He's still doing well. This is the reason why at 44 years old I'm as passionate as I am, because I see this change happen all the time like this. I walked into I'm doing work in a women's institution right now. So we have one of the maximum security women's institutions, and I'm in a BMU, a behavioral management unit, which is a special unit, a restricted housing unit. So these women are struggling with some of the most intense self-harm you'll ever see. And it's tough. It's tough to watch people hurt themselves. It's tough, and it's tough to watch officers not know what to do, but understandably, like I understand, nobody's just born saying, oh, I know what to do. So my job is to kind of go in there, and I kind of hang with the officers. Like I hang with them, and then I'll interact with the inmates, but then sometimes I'll just kind of give the officers some feedback, like, hey, I'm wondering if you could just shift this just a little bit. And they're much more open to that. Actually, what I find is when officers start asking me questions about their family, and they see that it works, they come back and they say, now what can I do with this person? So I love that. I love that. But so I was in this prison for an hour. I came to the prison, I said, look, I'm here with this particular unit, but I'm here, use me any way you can use me. So I was not in that prison for 1 hour, and I was down to RHU, and there was a woman who was refusing to cuff up. So they're getting ready to get the extraction team to come in and get her, and this lieutenant was on the phone, and the guy who was walking me around, he said, well, we have Dr. Conte here, you want him to try. So he looks, he rolls his eyes, he goes, oh, hold on a second, I guess we'll wait. We got the doctor here, we'll see if he works his magic. So I was like, I guess, I mean, I'll give you my best, I'll try. So I go talk to her, he's like, it doesn't matter, she's not gonna talk, she shouldn't talk to anybody, she just hasn't, this is gonna happen. And so I go up and I talk to her, 8 minutes later, she willingly cuffs up. The guy's like, holy shit. He's like, what did you do? I was like, well, I'm gonna show you. So the next day, very next day, he invited me, this guy who was super resistant and condescending when we first met, invited me the next day to do an L5 training, level 5 restricted housing unit training. This is why I get excited about this. This is why I get excited about this. Darkness once went to God and said, man, listen, the sun's been chasing me. The sun's been chasing me nonstop. God said, all right, well, let me go talk to him. So God goes and talks to the sun and says, hey, I hear you're chasing darkness. And sun said, hold on a second, I haven't been chasing darkness. I tell you what, you bring darkness before me, we'll hash this out. That happened millennia ago. It said to this day, God still can't get darkness in the same room as the light. Because where there is light, there can't be darkness. My light, the light I offer to the world, is yield theory. This is my passion. This is what I started in 1998. I've been developing it for 20 years and refining it. I've tried to make it simple. I've always tried to make it simple. When I was a kid, my parents told me early on I was a genius, and with that might sound like really great stuff, but it also came with a lot of, you're not going outside and playing because you're going to stay in and read. So where my friends were going out, I was reading. I had to read voraciously. I remember reading G.W.F. Hegel for the first time. First time I read Hegel, this German philosopher. It was so esoteric, so convoluted. I said, I will never be like that. If you can't explain a point easily, then what's the point? You don't know it. So I worked my whole career to try to make things really easy for people to understand. So what is yield theory? Yield theory is about, honestly, it's about leading with compassion and circumventing people's fight or flight response. So just as much as if someone comes at you physically, your amygdala on the left resonates, oh no, oh no, oh no. The same way that happens when someone comes at you physically, that happens when people come at you with extreme language. And if we don't, and as long as people are in their emotional center, they're not talking things out. So watch this, if we did a brain scan of all of your brains right now, the front part on the right, your frontal cortex would go off because that's the thinking part of your brain. We're not sitting here all emotional. When we get into situations and we see someone in a very highly emotional state, and we get emotional with them, we're not calming things down. So I teach people how to stay centered, to be able to pull people out of that limbic system and get into the frontal cortex. So there was a man, and he stumbled into this land of foolish people. So it's a good story. That's my favorite one. So this guy, he stumbles into this land of foolish people, and the people are all scared. Oh no, there's a monster in the village. There's a monster in the village. So the guy's like, where's this monster? So the people take him to the edge of the town and they point, and he looks and he sees a wide open field. He doesn't see anything. All he sees is a watermelon. He's like, where's the monster? They're like, it's right there. He's like, that's not a monster. He walks over, smashes the watermelon in half, takes a bite out of it. He turns around, people are pale as ghosts. Oh my God, he's worse than the first monster. He killed it and ate it. Let's get him. So they take their pitchforks, they drive him out of town. About a year later, another stranger rolls into the town. Another monster grew up outside the village, and the people again were afraid. There's a monster, there's a monster. So this stranger, he looks and he sees that it's a watermelon, and he knows it's a watermelon, but he knows that they don't know it's a watermelon. So he looks and he goes, he starts to walk out toward it, then he comes back, walks out with them, comes back, and then finally he gets them all to gather around. He touches it, they touch it. He becomes known as the great watermelon slayer. I feel like that story should have music coming down. I clap and do things like this and knock because the human attention span is 8 minutes. 8 minutes. That means no matter how dialed in you are, what I'm saying, maybe I'm vibing with what he's saying, in 8 minutes you'll be sitting on an island some of my time. That's okay. I say if you have a daydream, just go with it. Have fun. And when you're done, come on back and join us. I started off my career doing in-home counseling. I would go into people's homes and I saw things that I wouldn't have been able to see if I stayed in private practice. I saw people struggle in ways that were intense. And seeing that, meeting people where they were, literally meeting people where they were, was profound for me. I remember one time a woman who was also working with this job came in and she was dressed to the nines. This family was really poor. She was dressed to the nines. She walks in the house. She's like, ew, I'm not sitting down. And then 2 seconds later, she says that she hates video games and that wrestling is stupid. The little boy shuts down. He's like, that's it for him and that connection. And I watched that like, I'm coming from the outside. I'm going to tell you, right? So I never was like that. I said, I can't be like that. My job is to meet people where they are and change it. Meet people where they are and change it. There was a monk, and he was really holy, and people respected him, but he carried a mirror with him everywhere. And this one woman saw him walking down the street, and she's like, I don't understand. I thought this guy was supposed to be holy and humble, but he carries a mirror with him everywhere. So she goes up to him, and she says, I thought you were supposed to be this holy, humble monk, and I always see you checking out your mirror. And he looks, and he goes, oh, this. He says, I keep this in my pocket all the time for when I encounter problems. I take it out to remind myself that I am the source and the solution to my problems. I am both the source and the solution to my problems. As a professor for years, I love teaching. I mostly taught master's and doctoral level students, but once a year they would put me in an undergraduate class so we could recruit for our counseling program. Big class, 200 kids. I have to keep their attention. I'd be running up and down, standing on stuff, throwing things, get their attention in a fun way, not at them. And the point was, when my colleagues would say, oh, these kids today, I'm like, well, guess what? We're being paid to teach these kids today. So my job isn't to say that these kids today can't learn. It's my job is to say, I need to figure out how they learn and then go meet them there. And that's kind of I've reflected every time. I would say, what have I done effectively? What did I do that was not as effective? What can I do differently next time? And I take that approach with life. When it comes to communication, we all want change to happen. We all want change to happen. There were a bunch of mice, and they were being terrorized by this cat in this house. And they were like, man, we got to do something about this cat. And so they're all up in arms. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And finally, a young mouse, he said, I know what to do. We'll get a bell. We'll get a big bell, and we'll tie it around the cat's neck, and that way we'll know when the cat's coming. And everybody's like, yay, yay. And they're all like, what a great idea. And an old mouse with a cane walks over, and he's like, that's a fine idea, young man, but are you willing to go do it yourself? A lot of times we can propose ideas that are great, but are we really willing to go there ourselves and do it ourselves? We lead with our energy. We lead with our energy, you lead with your energy. Your energy precedes you. Your energy is walking out in front of you. You have to ask yourself, what is your energy bringing out? And as leaders of states, like, your energy reverberates. Your energy reverberates. I get to watch John Wetzel walk in a room and just watch that energy go through a room. That leadership's amazing. And I'm sure you all are like that as well. It's phenomenal to watch. It's phenomenal to watch. So what yield theory is about is going inside and looking at yourself. Control the controllables. Do the one thing that you can work with. So what's your big yield theory? What is all this about? What does it really come down to? So I realized that yield theory comes down to 3 core actions. You ready for this hardcore science? Here's what it is. Listen, validate, explore options. Listen, validate, explore options. Sometimes we come up with the fanciest stuff in the world, but the reality is it's the most simple, the most direct. So I teach people how to listen, validate, and explore options with others. It meets people where they are. I was talking about this one day, and a woman came up to me. It was like a counseling conference, and she was kind of condescending, and she said, that's it? That's all yield theory is? Listen, validate, explore options? And I said, yeah, I guess it is, but if you think about it, all Bruce Lee ever did was move, block, and hit. He did pretty well for himself. I guess Michael Jordan just shot the basketball, but if you reduce it that way. But the question is, how do we listen, and how do we listen effectively? So I want to show you some ideas on how we can listen effectively. Whoop, I'm going to go back here. When my daughter was 5 years old, I've never made a speech this far without mentioning my daughter. My daughter is my life, and I love her. She's 13. She's one of the most peaceful human beings you'll ever meet. I genuinely believe she'll change the world. She's phenomenal. So she never missed a day of meditation since she was 6.5 years old. So listen, so my daughter, one day, she came home from school at 5 years old, and she handed me a pamphlet. And the pamphlet said, "This is the truth." And it was like a religious pamphlet. And so she said to me, "Daddy, this is the truth, right? Because it says this is the truth." So I took her upstairs to her playroom. I put a big box on the floor in the playroom, and I had her lie so she could face one side of the box. And I put different objects around the box. So I had her close enough she could only see one side of the box. Where that white square is, I had a little guy standing there for a good perspective, but he didn't show up on this PowerPoint, so just picture a little guy standing right up against the box. So anyway, I have her leaning so she could only see one side of the box. And I said, what do you see? And she sees a little pony. She says, "It's My Little Pony." I said, "Is it true that there's a My Little Pony right there?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Is that true?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Is it true that there's a My Little Pony on every other side of the box?" And she said, "Yes." So I remember 5 years old. So I scooch her over so she can only see 2 sides of the box now. There was a pony and a little book. So she sees a book and she goes, "Oh, it's a book." I say, "Okay, no worries. But is it true that there's a pony still on that side?" "Yes." "Is that true?" "Yes." "Is it true that there's a book on this side?" "Yes." "Now, are there a pony and a book on the other side?" 5 years old, genius little kid. She goes, "Now, Daddy, I can't tell." I said, "That's exactly it. That's what listening's all about." In life, we only ever see our side of the box. We can imagine that we're seeing someone else's side of the box. We can believe it and convince ourselves that we're seeing someone else's side of the box, but they're seeing a perspective that we can't see. When it comes to neurology, we understand that someone else's perception of red might vary differently from yours slightly, but it's different. And how do you explain red to someone who can't see at all? Perception is reality. We learned after 9/11, when we used to think the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, only occurred when people watched trauma, we found out that the reality is that it's the perception of an event as traumatic or life-threatening that can induce this trauma and create PTSD. Perception is powerful. So, when it comes to listening, at all times being mindful to lead with humility. Recognize that you only ever see your side of the box. And that's okay. That's what being human is all about. But here's what happens. We live in a universe. We think about the solar system. So I was working with a college soccer team. I said to the kids, how many planets do we have in the solar system? Kids said 8. I said 8. I said, "Are you sure about that?" He said, "I'll bet my life on it." I said, "Are you counting dwarf planets?" He said, "What are dwarf planets?" I said, "You still bet your life on that?" He goes, "I don't think so." I said, "Well, right now we know we have 8 dwarf. International Astronomical Union identifies at least 8 regular-sized planets and 5 dwarf planets. Ceres is bigger than Pluto. We live in a galaxy with more than 100 billion stars and a universe that has, right now, more than 2 trillion galaxies. That's a big world. So what do? We bring it down to size. Whatever I think is the right way to think. Whatever I believe is the right way to believe. But what if we could lead with humility and have the humbleness to say, I only ever see my side of the box, and that's okay. It doesn't make me wrong or bad, but I need you. I need you to tell me about your side. Teach me about your side. Teach me about your perspective. You see, memory is not perfect. We know memory is not perfect. Eric Kandel, the leading neuroscientist in the world, demonstrated that memory isn't perfect, and that's okay. What if we could be less attached to our memory? Imagine how you'd approach people with more humility, rather than it's my way and that's it. This is what happened. No, this is my perception of what happened, and I'm willing to listen to your side. So my wife and I, we went to Hawaii for our 11th anniversary. We've been married 18 years. On our 11th anniversary, we went to Hawaii. We had been there prior. And when we got there, I said, listen, we rented a car, and I said, the Dole Plantation is going to be up here on our right. And my wife said, no, the Dole Plantation will be on our left. And I said, no, the Dole Plantation is going to be up here on our right. And she said, no, it's going to be on the left. And we paused, we looked at each other, and we smiled. We said, do you realize if this was year 1 of our marriage, we would have already been divorced by now? And we laughed, and we were able to have a good trip and not worry about it. Of course it was on the right, but that's not the whole reason why I tell you that story. We know memory isn't perfect. It allows us to lead with humility. When we lead with humility, then we can change things. So listen is the key, first key. The second one is to validate. And when I say validate, that doesn't mean you have to condone actions. I never condone violent actions, period. There's no condoning them whatsoever. However, there is acknowledging how someone's feeling. I was talking to a woman who has life plus 40, and she was recognized, for whatever reason, she's struggling with where her cognitive functioning is, and so even though she's been down for a while, it just finally really hit her that she wasn't going to be, this is where she's staying. And she's having this breakdown. Now, did she do really awful things to people? Yes, she did. But guess what? As a fellow human being, I can acknowledge, without condoning actions, that would be really crippling, something I can't even comprehend your side of the box, but I'll sit here and I'll listen with you. And the more I do that with her, the more she calms down, the safer environment it is for the whole unit. Validating is this. So if you're daydreaming, come back to us. Because I don't want to leave here people thinking, Dr. Conte says there's water on the brain. This is my analogy. My analogy is that limbic system, that part in the red up there, that's your emotional center of the brain. And sometimes we validate people, and we think that we validated them, but the truth is we just made 1 or 2 statements like, oh, that must be tough for you, and then we move on. That's not validating people. Validate people not until you think you validated them, but until they've actually been validated, until they've released the energy. So I make the analogy of, imagine it's water, and you kind of turn that spigot on, and you let all the water come out, and until you drain it all out, then the person's not ready to move to the frontal cortex. And doing this validation and stuff, it's not that this takes a ton of time to do, because you can do it if you lead with compassion and humility. You can get to people relatively quickly. I was speaking at an institution one time, and they asked me, they said, we have this inmate on death row, and he has to be isolated from everybody, even from everybody else right now. This guy's breaking, he's like, nobody's talking to him. We sent teams of people up there, and the superintendent said, I'd really appreciate if you go check in with him. Absolutely. So I go there and talk to him. Listen, validate, explore options. So I listen to him. I'm going to get to explore options here in a minute. So I'm listening to him, and I'm validating him. Like, my man just got off all his psychiatric medication. Like, if anybody's ever been on any kind of medication whatsoever, and you get rid of that, you're going to be feeling some sort of way. You're going to be agitated. So I acknowledge that. I acknowledged it. We had officers watching. Because, as he said, like, I do this in ways that I try to make the officers not even like, hey, listen, please watch. They're like kind of watching, I want to see what he does. First of all, the man talked to me for 30 straight minutes and told me a lot of stuff in 30 minutes. But the other thing was, we got to move it in the right direction, and here's how. Once you listen, once you validate, you move people out of that emotional piece, then that last piece is to explore options. So when you explore options, the person's starting to think. So I looked at him and I said, look, if I was about to run a race right now, and he's in the cell right over here, and I'm looking at him, there's an officer down the hall that way, and somebody down the hall that way, look, just watching, I could tell they're watching me. So I said, if I was about to run a race right now, and the race went that way, and I just started running this way, what would you tell me? He said, you're going the wrong effing direction. I said, you tell me that, exactly, I'm going the wrong direction. Let me ask you want to get out of here. Literally, I was pointing to the area he wanted to get out into. You want to get out of there, but you're doing things right now that are preventing that. So what can you do to run the race in the right direction? 30 minutes into our conversation, he brought that analogy back. These analogies stick with people. When you work to find people's cognitive functioning and you implement creativity, you can meet people where they are and give them things they can actually use. People hold on to analogies. The analogies are powerful. So when I listen, I validate, I explore options. And I want to give you an idea. So this is what it is with exploring options. Now you have both people in the frontal cortex. And that changes things. A man came into my anger management group one time. And it was an open group. So we have about 30 people in there. So it was his first time in the group, in the anger management group. And he said he was furious. He said someone stole his $450. He said, I'm getting this dude. Now, he's not giving me eye contact. He's not looking at me. And he's just like, I'm about to get this dude. I hear the conversation. I said, listen, I'm in a safe space. You can talk about it, so tell me what's going on. So he's like, this dude stole my wallet. He stole $450 from me. He said, I know he did it. And I'm going out, like, I'm getting him. That's all I'm saying is I'm getting him. It's his first day in the group. So I said to him, listen, how long were you down? He said, 8 years. I said, 8 years. Did you like your time when you were down? He said, what? I said, did you like your time when you were down? And he says, he puts his head down. And the guys in the group, I had their respect. They're like, just answer, Doc. He goes, no, I like my time. I said, all right, let me ask you this. Was there ever a moment when you were locked down that you wanted to get out? He's like, man, who is this fool? They said, just answer. He said, have you ever been to prison? I said, no, I've never been incarcerated. He said, then you wouldn't know. I said, so were there ever times you wanted to get out? He said, yes. I said, how badly? He said, so badly. I said, what would you have done to get out? He said, I'd have done anything. I said, would you have spent $450? That was the amount that he had stolen, believed he had stolen from him, that he was going to go get this guy after. The guy, he stays for the rest of the group. Now he goes away. This is my first interaction with this guy. The next week, he shows up to group. I'm like, thank God. He shows up to group. He said, listen, he said, I'm going to tell you what happened. He said, when you said that stuff last week, and I'm taking out all the cuss words. He said, when you said that stuff last week, I thought you were full of it, but it gave me pause. So I decided I'm going to wait at least till the morning, because we talked later that day about at least not making decisions when you're hungry or tired. He said, I'm going to wait till at least the morning. He said, I woke up the next morning, and I was so happy that I wasn't incarcerated. I was like, man, I'm going to clean my room. So he started with this big pile of clothes on his floor, and he found his wallet and the $450. It's powerful when you give people the freedom in their minds to say they don't have to be a puppet to the way they've learned life to be. That they don't have to give away their power all the time. So I teach these real practical techniques for people. Real practical techniques. I was working with this CEOs, and I was telling them samurai stories get a lot of respect, especially from people who are working, doing really tough jobs. So I said there was a samurai, and he went to the king, told him, I need you to go kill this guy for me. So the samurai went, he defeated this guy really quickly. He was just about to kill him, and the guy spit in his face. So the samurai stepped back, sheathed his sword. He took the guy into the king. He arrested him. King said, I told you to kill him. He said, I couldn't kill him, your highness. He said, why not? He said, because he spit in my face. And in that moment, I got angry, and I realized that if I would have killed him in that moment, I would have killed him out of anger, not out of duty. And so I brought him in. To have the self-control, to not respond and be reactive. That's not something we wake up knowing. It's something we train. It's something we aspire to. We train to get stronger physically, but we also have to train our minds. If we want peace in our lives, we have to practice peace. And we have to lead by example because our energy is powerful and people are seeing us. You're taking on enormous things. You're running states. You got these huge things you're taking on. There was a gnat, and he was going to fight a lion, and he said, I got to get ready for this. So this gnat got ready. He trained as much as a gnat can train. And so he goes against this lion, and he actually defeats him. He keeps biting on his nose. The lion keeps swarming, but he can't get him. So the gnat wins. He beats him. He defeats the lion. Whew, I just beat a lion. I'm a gnat. And he turns around with his head all swelled, whoosh, gets stuck in a spider web, gets eaten by a spider. Sometimes we prepare ourselves for these giant things, but we forget to take care of the little things. When we talk about self-care, when we talk about being able for you to do the things you need to do and have your staff do the things they need to do to be prepared physically, mentally, spiritually, to do a very difficult job, it's so important. It's so important. And the training itself doesn't have to be complex. This family, they sent their son off. He was getting into trouble. They sent him to a monastery. He came back after the first year. They said, "What'd you learn?" He said, "All I learned to do was breathe." He goes back. He's there for 10 more years. He comes back. They say, what did you learn? He said, "All I learned to do was breathe." Many years later, this man, he finally reaches enlightenment. As an old man, he becomes profoundly wise and enlightened. And they say, "In all these years, what have you learned?" He said, "Finally, I have learned to breathe." We take for granted our basic breath. But when we learn to control our breath and our energy, we can impact people in a powerful, powerful way. So I was trying to figure out ways of getting people to understand. I was working with the University of Pittsburgh, their sports teams, and I was trying to get them to be mindful. So I said to these kids, from people representatives from all their sports, I said, if I gave you a bucket right now, just a bucket, what would you put in it? And the kid's like, "Well, what am I supposed to put in?" I said, "I'm just giving you a bucket. What do you put in it?" One kid's like, "I don't know, phone." Somebody else is like, "Food." I was like, "Okay, here's the point. Whatever you put in the bucket, that's going to be in the bucket, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "That's a pretty obvious answer, isn't it?" "Yeah, guess what? Whatever you put in your mind is going to be in it. If you're playing violent games, that's what's in your mind. If you're practicing violent speech, that's what's in your mind. It depends what you're filling your mind. Whatever you fill your mind with is going to be in it." So I say, as leaders, why don't we begin to figure out ways to fill inmates' minds with peace, with programs and things that will teach a peaceful path. If you want to be good at the piano, you play the piano. Whatever you want to master, you practice. Whatever you practice, you master. So if you master snapping and being impulsive, if that's what you do every day, that's what you get good at. Whatever you practice, you master. So why not teach the things that bring the peace we want to change? We know the path, the arrow's been set. We know what needs to be done. Now the question is, are we just going to get started and start doing it? Change takes a while, though. Change takes a while. I was at, one time I was running a group, and this man, about 30 years old, he came in, and he said, "Man, I'm done drinking. I'm done drinking. I'm done with it. I'm just never drinking again." And someone said to him, "How long have you been struggling with alcohol?" He said, 10 years. He said, 10 years, but I'm never drinking. I'm never drinking again. They said, "How long have you been sober?" He said, 3 days. He said, "But I'm never even be tempted again. I'm good. I got this." And he said, so an older gentleman in the group, he looked at him and he said, "Brother, you walk 20 miles in the woods, it's going to be 20 miles back out." That was a good saying, 20 miles in, 20 miles out. So we started to use that all the time in the group. If it's taking you a long time to get to a certain spot, it's going to take you a long time to get out of it. So I lived into that. I had a dirt bike. And when you go out on a dirt bike, you should probably have friends if you're going out in the desert. But as you can tell probably by my looks, I marched to the beat of my own drummer, so sometimes I would just go out on my dirt bike on my own. One day I was out on my dirt bike in the middle of the Nevada desert, and I hit a rock, hit a bend too fast, I crashed. Man, my knee hurt, my bike wouldn't start. I look at my odometer, and it says 15.4 miles, and then all of a sudden that damn saying comes back in my mind, 20 miles in, 20 miles out. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I got this giant bike, how am I going to get through this? So I thought, I'm going to give myself a minute to feel the way I do, because I feel some sort of way. So I gave myself a minute, and then I thought, all right, I started messing with it. Okay, I'm not wasting time here. So I started messing around, I got my bike started. I get my bike started, I go a little bit further, and I see a man in the middle of the Nevada desert, 15 miles out, walking with a water bottle this big. And I don't know how many of you watch CSI, but I've watched too many episodes to wonder what a guy doing out in the middle of the Nevada desert that far. So I said, "Listen, man, how are you out here this far with just a water bottle? That's going to be 30 miles round trip already." He said, "Oh, no, you got to take this canyon, go down this way, go back around this way." So I followed his instructions. I'm getting back down to my truck, and when I get back down there, I'm dripping in sweat, and all of a sudden I get the chills because I look at my odometer and it says 5.1 miles. And that saying came in a whole new light because I realized that sometimes the journey out is 15 miles, but sometimes with insight, the journey back is only 5 miles. When it's taken us a long time to get where we are in corrections, but with insight, with the right approach, and with actually doing it, and with this leadership here to actually move forward, these are people who can do it. Change doesn't have to take 20 miles back out. It doesn't have to. So I was working with Pitt Volleyball, University of Pittsburgh volleyball team, and I walked into the locker room, and the girls are sitting around, and I walked in front of them, and I picked up a table. And I said, all right, I'm excited to talk to you today. We're going to have a good talk. We're going to do a lot of good stuff here together. And I'm just holding this table. They're like, what the heck's wrong with this guy? Like, I'm holding this table. I'm like, so I just keep trying to talk normal for a minute. And I say, I'm a strong guy. This table's going to get heavy eventually. So finally, one of the girls runs up and she helps me. I said, thank you. Thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate that. We're going to be holding this the whole talk, though. It's probably going to get a little heavy for both of us. A couple more girls ran up. Then eventually the whole team ran up. They run up, they start to lift it. And they even suggested that we hold it with one finger. With all of us together, we held this up with one finger. I said that represents us winning a championship. They went on this past year to win the ACC championship. The reality is this, the lesson I taught the girls that day, the lesson I give to you now is the load, and it will always be what it is. The effort and the impact that you put into it matters. That you don't push things off and you do it, and that we teach that message matters. I was talking to my good friend last night. She was asking about what got me into this, and I said I've been reflecting, and I believe that when I was little, my mom was a teacher, and I came from a rougher area. And my mom said, "Listen, if there's a fight in school, and I ever find out you watched that fight and didn't break it up, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble." And my mom meant it, so I'm like, I can never watch a fight. So I learned early on, if somebody's in trouble, step in, step in, step in. It doesn't matter. So we step in. We do things. We need to lift the table. The load is the load. It is what it is in corrections. I don't think that you're going to be like that gnat on the bull's horns because I think you're going to leave your mark. I don't think you're like the gnat who's flying into the spider's web because I think you're going to really start to continue to take care of yourself and teach your staff to take care of yourself. And you will be able to understand that it's your light, that it will change things. When you work on your light, it'll change things. I'll leave you with this story. The wind and the sun, they got in a contest, and they said, they're getting egos, they're like, we want to see who's stronger. So they said, I know whoever can get this guy's jacket off, we'll see if that's the tougher one, right? So the wind blew and blew and blew harder and harder and harder, but the man just held onto his jacket more tightly. And then it was the sun's turn, and he came out, and instead of focusing on the man, instead of focusing on anything outside of himself, he focused on himself, and the sun got brighter and brighter and brighter. And as he did, the man started getting hot. He takes off the coat and sets it down. When your light shines bright enough, there can't be darkness. I forgot to give you my last PowerPoint slide. This is how you get a hold of me. I think they're going to send you this. And I have two things that I would tell you about as I leave here. My contact information to get a hold of me. And also, I do a podcast called Emotional Management. And I just started a radio show by that name as well. But on iTunes, it's called Emotional Management. It's a 1 minute every day thing. And then I have a radio show now I'm doing, so it's a call-in talk show. And since most of my audience isn't just local, it's like you can hear it on the radio, so I can get information for you for that. I love what I do. I'm genuinely honored to be here. Thank you so much for staying focused.
That's awesome.